What's going on, guys? Today we're talking about one of the most fish catching baits of all time. That's probably one of the most forgotten baits with the advent of forward facing sonar. We're talking about the Carolina rig. Stick around and I'll show you my preference on what I throw, how I usually throw, and at the very end I'm going to give you a little tip to catch some of those fish that may not be wanting to bite a bigger Carolina rig, or just a way to catch some more numbers. What are some of the reasons I would throw a Carolina rig, and what is a Carolina rig? So basically, a Carolina rig is a rig that allows you to position your weight further up your line from your hook, and it's going to give your bait a weightless presentation on the bottom. I use it in deeper water. My favorite way to use a Carolina rig is as a search bait. If I'm fishing on ledges like on the Tennessee River, or fishing on long, slow tapering points, and I'm trying to find those hard spots or those little bits where it's pea gravel or smaller rock, or even trying to find isolated rock, I'm gonna throw a Carolina rig. And the way I set mine up, usually I'm gonna throw it on a 7.6 heavy action rod, usually the Advanced Series 7.6 heavy from Pride Fishing Rods. I'm gonna throw 30-pound braid, and I'm gonna throw, this is my setup for the bigger Carolina rigs. So it's 7.6 rod, 30-pound braid, or 20-pound fluorocarbon. I prefer the braid, especially if I'm using it as a search bait to find the fish or find the bottom. It gives me a little bit more sensitivity and allows me to really feel what that bottom's doing. I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce minimum, all the way up to an ounce, ounce and a half tungsten barrel weight. And I'm gonna run that to a plastic bead. If you run glass, guys, with tungsten, you're gonna bust the glass. The only reason I use the bead is to protect my knot to my swivel. From the swivel, I'm gonna run an 18 to 24 inch leader. Truthfully, I really don't throw a Carolina rig enough to really worry about jumping to a 4-foot leader. And of course, there's times throughout the year where that makes a big difference. But like I said, for me, consistency, being able to know what I'm doing, 18 to 24 inches is that sweet spot for me. Usually I will go up to a 3-foot sometimes if the bite's a little bit tougher. But I'm just using it to find the fish, and to find out the structure and the composition of the bottom. I will throw a more finessey Carolina rig, especially in the spring, and that's actually going to be one of the tricks I show you later on. I'm going to throw that on like a 7 or a 7.3 medium heavy. I'm going to throw 15 to 17 pound fluorocarbon mainline and about a 10-pound leader. I'm going to run 10 to 12-pound leader on my Carolina rig from the swivels, regardless whether I'm fishing the 1 ounce and the tungsten with the braid, or I'm fishing up shallow 15-pound test in the springtime for a more finessey application. So I'm going to run that down to an EWG hook most of the time. With the finesse one, I'm going to run a 1/0 or a 2/0, and I'm usually going to run a finesse worm by Zoom. The bigger one, I'll run a 3 or 4/0 EWG with, most of the time, either a brush hog, a Senko, or an Ultra Vibe speed crawl. From there, give you a little bit of the setup for my finesse rod and what I'm usually going to do with it too. So I'm going to go 1/4 to a 1/2 ounce usually with that. I'm going to use a little bit lighter line, 15 to 17 for my main line. This is one I really like to work through brush, and I like that lighter weight because it won't dig into the brush, and you can really feather that weight and the bait through laydowns and through brush piles. As far as the gear ratio for these, I'm just running in just whatever you have, honestly. I'm not real particular, but I usually like a 6.4 to a 7.5 to 1. Somewhere in that range, something you're going to be able to take up line, but it's not going to be crazy. You can run a faster gear ratio because you're working this bait with the rod. I like to usually do 1 to 2 foot drag. Basically, usually whatever my leader length is, I'm going to do a slow pull from side to side with the rod tip, and that's how I'm going to work this bait. If you pull up to a rock, you can kind of pick up, hop it over the rock, and then continue to slow drag that bait. So that's basically my setup. I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of the different Carolina rigs that I use and how I set them up, and then I'll give you that special tip for in the spring. All right, so I have 2 Carolina rig setups in my hand right now. This is going to be my bigger Carolina rig setup. I'm gonna run 2 bobber stops, if you can see that. I'm gonna run 2 bobber stops on my main line. I'm just using 20-pound fluoro here just to show you. I've got that to a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight, a plastic bead run to a swivel, and then about 18 inches of leader line. I'm running that to a 4/0 EWG and a green pumpkin Zoom speed crawl. This is going to be the setup that I usually use on my 7.6 or if I'm fishing deeper water. Usually 15 to 30 feet. This is the weight I'm going to throw and just slow it down. If I get out, 30 plus feet, or if there's more current, then I'll go up to an ounce, ounce and a half. But this is just what I found that works for me. So the next one that I've got here to show you is right here. This is also that trick I was going to tell you about. So you're saying, yeah, no, that's a Texas rig. Well, here's the deal. In the springtime, especially around me, a finesse Texas rig kills smallmouth. So what I've done here to make this a Carolina rig to search for these bedding fish, because the fish around here will bed in 10, 12 feet of water, and you really can't see the fish, but that's where a lot of these smallmouth are going to spawn. So what I've got here, I've got a bobber stop up my line. I've got my weight. This is a 1/4 ounce bullet weight. I'm out of barrel weights for my Carolina rigs right now, but it's a 1/4 ounce tungsten barrel weight. And below that, I've got not a swivel, but 2 bobber stops. And I do this for a couple of reasons. I don't really care about the front bobber stop because I'm not so worried about the weight sliding up the line. I'll use that to kind of set where I want the weight to stay. But then I'll take these 2 bobber stops and I'll move them up. And what this does is this gives you an adjustable leader line for in the spring, especially, to where you're not having to cut and retie and cut and retie, and you can adjust it on the fly. I know I'm not the only one that does this. There's several people here on TikTok or here on YouTube that does it, but I've learned that this really helps when I'm trying to figure out how the fish want to bite. So I can adjust that Carolina rig length, and then once you figure out what the fish want, what's most productive, then you can cut your line, put a swivel on, and set your leader length that way. But you can double or even triple that bobber stop there in the back and make sure that weight's not going to come down. Usually when you put 2, it's not going to slide down the bait. I've got this ran on 10-pound test fluoro, and here's the bait. It's a 2/0 EWG hook to a Zoom finesse worm, green pumpkin. But I will do this, and then once I figure out kind of what structure or where those bass are positioning, or if I find a bed, the great thing about this finesse Carolina rig technique, you can then pull it down and make a finesse Texas rig with it. And then it's super versatile. You can do it with the bigger Carolina rig as well, but I find that the heavier weight tends to move the bobber stops more than I like. So I usually stray away from it, but I will actually fish this finesse Carolina rig on a spinning rod. Usually it's the 7-foot medium spinning rod from Pride, the advanced series. And I'm usually running braid to like 10 foot of a 10 or 12 pound leader. For me, this works great also in around brush piles. Obviously not super thick because we're running lighter line. You don't want to tangle it up. It is a little bit harder with a lighter line to get the fish out. But that's basically it. I'm going to work this the exact same way. I'm going to be a slow drag from side to side. And when you feel the bite, this is the most important thing. It took me forever to figure this out. A lot of people don't talk about it. They'll show you how to tie it. They'll show you how to set up a Carolina rig, but they don't tell you about the hook set. What I've learned for me and what has worked for me, the hook set on a Carolina rig, you do not want to set the hook straight up. You can with the finesse stuff, but here's the problem. And I'll show you this and you'll see why. So say right here, this weight, you can't see it. I'll put it in front of my shirt. So this weight, if you can see it, say that's dragging on the bottom, right? If I jerk straight up, watch what that weight does. It's gonna pop up. It's gonna pop up really quick. Most of the time, it's actually gonna jerk the bait out of the fish's mouth. If you do a sideways hook set, you pull it sideways, you're more likely to set the hook on the fish, pin the fish, and you're not gonna pop that up as quick. You're not gonna pop that weight up and pop open that fish's mouth. This is especially important when you're fishing the heavier Carolina rig on a heavier action rod. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you were able to learn something from this. If there's any other techniques or anything specific you'd like to hear me talk about, you know, let me know, drop it in the comments below, send me a message, let me know what you want to see. I hope this puts a few more fish in the boat for you. And full disclaimer here at the very end, I am not a professional angler. This is what has worked for me and what I have figured out through the years of fishing that I have under my belt. These are just a few tips and tricks that I had to learn myself, and I want to be able to share them with y'all. So if you like the video, hit the like button, share this to a friend, and get somebody else out on the water. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.